And Amber, I'm not able to open my video yet.
Same.
Yeah, it's saying the host has stopped it. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Amber, why'd you stop it?
Jesse, somebody might be having a bad hair day. We don't know. This might be a real thing.
I think it's default that way. I wish.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I'm pretty good at getting haircuts soon, but
I don't know. Like, don't. It's being recorded. Let's not say anything crazy, Jesse.
look, I told you my value is authenticity. I'm just keeping it real.
It
That's
is.
a good. That's a
you
fine
look
hairstyle,
good.
though. He should be proud of that.
You look good.
Yeah.
Did he pose?
Glad to see everybody. Glad to see all the smiles. I feel some kind of way about Jesse mentioning bad hair day to somebody who's losing his hair, but it's okay.
Oh!
I didn't mention a bad hair day. Let the record show. I did not mention a bad hair day. That was not me.
It was. I said it before the camera.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, as a good public servant.
Yeah, but Xavier and we're living it.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you all for being here. We want to call this task force meeting to order in good spirits, as we have already demonstrated. Again, it's such a pleasure to see you. Can't wait till we can actually be in the same space. We want to welcome you to this effort. This is part of good work that's being done across our community. And as we are thinking about how to start this thing, Marcia and I wanted to talk about what brought us to this, because you guys had a chance to do that, and I'm not sure that we clearly did that. So we're going to have our say as part of the welcome, and then we'll talk about our values and move forward. But again, we appreciate you being here as task force members, as liaisons from our electeds, and as the community. And so for our community, if we would, again, as we have been doing, have a moment of silence for the safety and wellness of our community. Thank you so much. So I'll kick it off. Those that know me know I have a story and or analogy for everything. So I'm going to force myself to just use one. As a retired educator, one of my goals after retirement was to go into grad school and study education policy analysis. And one of the projects I had was to go to the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth. And the meeting was in DC. And because it was in DC, we had a plethora of federal agencies there to present to those of us who are working on supporting students who are experiencing homelessness. And my policy beef is the fact that many policies never truly effectively reach the people they were written and normally well attended to reach. And so I stood there in awe as I was doing my field study for my class, watching and taking notes as 4 federal agencies were presenting to us an app that would bring everything together. And the auditorium was full of people who were working directly with homeless students. And after the app presentation, there was not one single question about the app. Every question revolved around the same thing. Why is it that the policies that identify homeless students experiencing homelessness for HUD don't match what we deal with in education? In other words, if someone is unsheltered, there is support. If someone is living with their uncle but doesn't have their own home, they're not considered homeless under certain regulations. So you have all these siloed agencies whose policies don't all reach the persons. And so having been on the board of education, it was one of my missions to try to reach the people with the policies. And so that type of work has brought me here, as far as making sure that at the end of this work, there will be recommendations, we hope, for policy changes as well as budgets. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. I'm excited about all the work that's already happening that we're going to hear from during the course of our work. And so that's really my passion coming in. I like to make sure that the policies reach the intended recipients of the work. So I'll pass it on to Marcia for her why.
Thank you. I just have to say, y'all, it is a joy to co-chair with Xavier, Cason. Thank you for your experience and for your wisdom that you bring to this task force. It's not on the screen, but I'm sitting here next to task force member Cynthia Fox. Glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, boy. And I just wanted to let y'all know that this is like a kind of a dream come true. That when Mayor Schul called and asked if I would co-chair, it was like I've been waiting for that for 30 years. That we are going to start asking the right questions, because I think we are asking the wrong questions in the criminal legal system. And I think it is keeping us perpetually unsafe. And the question that we ask is, what law was broken? And who broke that law? And how are we going to punish that person? And that's what we ask. And that's what we do. And so I just want y'all to know that I'm here personally representing my dear friend, Naisha McMillan, who at the tender age of 23 was shot to death in 2018. And I just wonder, what we could have done to prevent that. And I just think of her and her family and all the families who have to endure and bear and carry the burden of what I think is our collective violence. And I'm also here representing in honor of Thomas Moore, who has been accused of killing Naisha, and who today, as of today, we will have spent $96,000 incarcerating him in the Durham jail. And I just asked myself, and I'm sure the family does as well, what if we had spent even a little bit of that money in 2004 when he was sentenced to prison, actually, for killing Johnny Scurlock? So could we have done something differently so that my friend, Naisha McMillan, who I met when she was a student at the tender age of 13, would be with me today? And I will never stop loving her. And I'm also here to represent and to honor my love for Williams, who came home from prison and at the unbelievable age of 25 was shot and killed in Durham, and no one was ever arrested. So I'm here representing 50% of Durham families who have lost a loved one to violence, who will have to endure a criminal justice system that asks everything except the most important question, which is, how do we repair the harm? How do we prevent this from happening? How do we address the harm? Who's been harmed and whose responsibility is it to address that harm? And I'm also here for the 50% of the hundreds and hundreds of Durham families who will never know who killed their loved one, because it's not a crime against them. It's a crime against the people of North Carolina. I guess y'all know that it is an abstract idea that when there's a crime committed, when people harm one another, it's not a crime against a family or a person. It's a crime against the people of North Carolina. And I know that I joined those families who will never, whose all the phone calls from the police have stopped, who have accepted the fact that they will never know who took their loved one. because maybe they weren't the right color of skin, they weren't powerful enough, they weren't rich enough, they weren't connected enough. I mean, you can't help but wonder, why was my child so unimportant that we would not find the person responsible who created the greatest tragedy imaginable. So I am so excited and grateful for this task force, because we're asking the right questions. We're asking who's been harmed. We're asking what can we do to address the needs of those who have been harmed, including those who we have traditionally just kicked out of the kingdom. Everybody, those who are sitting in our jails, right? Those who are sitting in our prisons, and those beloved families who are going to have to endure a lifetime of loss. And so I'm just so excited, and I'm so honored to be with y'all. And I just want you all to know that that is where my heart is, and that so the values are very important, and what we're doing here is just, for me, it's just a dream come true. So thank y'all. And I will pass it back to, would you like to say? Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time via this way. It took a while for me to get here because this is not at all my thing. But my reason for being on this task force is due to my own experiences with mass incarceration as well as domestic violence. And basically my questions to the city and county is if they're trying to do anything to prevent domestic violence or any type of violence in the streets, as well as mass incarceration. They should do better things with their income that can assist people with small incomes so that they will have things to do in this town. The majority of people in this town that were born and raised here have been kicked to the curb, and their children, their children's children, therefore they're lacking options to do whatever it is they desire to do, as opposed to being in the streets. That, along with being homeless due to economics, is a problem. So if you don't address those problems, then the rest of the problems are obsolete. And at that point, I'll say assalamu alaikum until next time.
Thank you, Cynthia. And turn it back to you, Xavier.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for allowing Cynthia, Marcia, and myself to have a moment to just speak to our whys. I said it with gratitude, and I believe that gratitude, like faith, should be served with action. But since there's no reactions on this particular panel, I'll just have to put my hand over my heart. I was going to send something else, but there's no reactions available. We want to move on to the values. We normally, the last two meetings have shared what values you as task force members are bringing into this space. And I was challenged by Marcia to try to synthesize what we've said so far. So I will do my best. I'll share this, wherein I believe that of the 25, 26, 27 values that were expressed, that these that you see here at the bottom of this brick wall that we're building up towards safety and wellness represent how we stand out and the stance we take toward others in patience, love, and inspiration, in graciousness, compassion, blessedness, and respect. And that on that foundation, then we talk about how we stand up for others. First, our stance toward others at the bottom, then how we stand up for others and for ourselves with these values that you brought in. And then to fill up the wall are the values that for me spoke to how we stand as a community. And obviously, this is just my outlook on what you brought into the space during the first meetings with your values. So we just kind of put them in an aggregate form, and I just try to think of a way to present them in a different way. So there's that. I do want to mention again that, and it's on your agenda as well, what our mission is. And again, our mission is also strengthened by our values. Our mission is to identify and assess community-based safety and wellness services, existing and non-existing, that address the needs of residents who have been harmed and who have caused harm. So if there's anybody viewing for the first time, I think you got a good sense of what we're here for. I think you got a good sense. So I'll turn it back over to Marcia to talk about our protocols for our meetings moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, this will be the easy part. We're here to make decisions, and so we need to think about how we're going to do it. There's nothing like a few rules to get us going. Because as we build the roundtables, even today, I think we'll be making decisions on what roundtables we want. So I would just like to suggest that when we make decisions at this point, just a simple majority will do, except for when we get to the recommendations to elected officials. When we get to that point, so anything that we vote on that's going to be to elected officials would be a 2/3. And so now we get to vote. Let's hope that we can do this with consensus. Does that sound good to everyone? Thumbs up, is that cool? And does that seem reasonable? We can change them. This is just, it is us. Does that sound good, Jennifer? I can't see what you're doing.
So I know we chatted about this yesterday. Yeah. I don't want to slow down the train with more discussion about procedure, but I would not be disappointed to see ensconced in our procedure a way for people who are genuinely in a position of objection to something that the majority of the task force agrees with, just to ensure that there is satisfaction to be found there, that those voices are able to be lifted up, even if they're in the minority, just because we do come from so many different perspectives and experiences.
Yes.
That it might be the one person that disagrees with the rest of us that has the experience we should all be bending to.
Absolutely. I'm used to consensus situations, so that sounds beautiful. But in this, since we're here for a very short time, to do a big finish a big mission, I agree. And I think that that's one thing that needs to be in all of our notes and our roundtables and the work that we do in smaller groups, that if there is, that we reflect the opinions, that votes don't reflect everyone's opinion, but it just, if a decision has to be made, that sounds like a good way to do it. And also with the understanding that we've got two very, very skilled folks, Ajane and Jennifer, who have lots of techniques, lots of great ideas on how to facilitate different ways of making decisions. So, but just for the, just for working right now, can we all agree? Is that great? Xavier, it was hard for me to see everybody. Does it seem?
I agree, and just want to state that, and I'm not sure if the notes are shared out, whether how widely the notes are shared out, but to just kind of piggyback off that, I think giving folks the opportunity to say, I have a hard no, and this is why, and just including that in the notes.
Yes.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we record the actual votes. Some of them be pretty unanimous, some of them will be different, and that'll be really important. And if we decide on a particular specific proposal to say, and this is this was the one that was the second most considered or whatever.
Perfect.
But to Tyler's point, absolutely and that person, that task force member would have the right to say, yes, please identify my name as the person who had the hard no, or just a task force member objected and here's why. They should be able to decide whether they want to be named or not.
Absolutely. Perfect. That sounds great. Dwayne, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this at all?
No, I was just considering though if we could do Zoom polls at some point, but I'm not sure yet. I'm still processing issues of confidentiality and to what extent people want to be open with their votes.
Beautiful. That's great. Yes, Xavier had also mentioned polling. Yeah, so we've got just a multiple multiple options, but I think that what we all agree is that opinions will be taken, will be in the record. Okay, great. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Dwayne. All right, super. So we'll simple majority for simple things. All right, beautiful. So
could I ask a couple quick questions?
Certainly.
So we're doing 2/3 rather than simple majority. And what's the idea behind doing 2/3 rather than 51%?
For recommendations to elected bodies.
The idea is like it's a stronger yes. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And so, and that's 2/3 of the people present at a given meeting?
Yes. Thank you. I'm looking at you, Xavier. Yes.
Great. And then folks in the 1/3 that's a dissenting body could name their reason and have that reflected in the notes.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Absolutely. Great. Beautiful.
Quick question.
Certainly.
I agree with everything, and we do often. Well, I have on past boards. You want the dissenting information to go out there, so. I do love that idea. I'm happy that Jennifer lifted it up. I'm trying to figure out because Manju brought up a great point. Would it be better to do 2/3 of who is here or 2/3 in the event you have a quorum? I don't know how much of a stickler y'all are for Robert's rules. So that's why I'm asking. And again, I'm a non-voting person. I'm just a liaison. I'm just throwing that out there. See if the cat licks it up. So I don't know which would be better. I don't know which would be better. Like if you had a quorum, because of course, you can, I don't sense myself, Bettina, we couldn't vote, but let's just say it was only 7 people on here, right? For one given night. Would you hold it until you had a quorum? So those are just things that I just want to throw out. Because I want it to be successful. And what I would hate is if some recommendations were made, and I've seen this on other bodies, not here in Durham, where, it was a membership of 200 people and only 11 people were there that night. Or example, at the General Assembly, when they vetoed the governor's budget, nobody, yeah, you're right. Nobody was in the room. Literally nobody, everybody was in the room doing gerrymandering. And they said, y'all gonna call the vote today? So everybody left, call the vote. And they vetoed it. So just thinking about things like that, I'm just, again, now I'm gonna go back to non-voting silent status now. So.
Oh no, we love it, love it.
My experience is that there is no voting at all without a quorum. That's my experience. So if there's no quorum, there's no vote to be taken.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank y'all for that input. Also, just want to invite everybody to feel free to make recommendations for the agenda. Xavier and I have sort of, that's been our calling, and would just like to enlarge that. So, and to do that, please use that's for folks in public too, not just on the task force. You just need to email communitysafety@durhamnc.gov. And it'll come to us, and we'll certainly honor your message and your recommendations. So that'll do it for me. And let's talk roundtables. Xavier?
Yeah. So toward the end of our last meeting, there task force roundtables, the terms and terminology. Oh my goodness, it really to me became muddy, and I didn't do much to help that. So I brought some help this time. So I have some slides to just talk about what that looks like. This is a work in progress. What I'm going to show you is a slide presentation. When you see a slide that has a light bulb on it, that lets you know we're going to go back into it and edit and make changes and make it a living document. I can't do that while it's in slide mode. So I'm going to go through the slides first, with the understanding that many of them we will come back in and edit. And I did I see in the chat, quorum for this group is more than 8. So once you've reached 8, you've got your quorum. And that's a quote. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen with the slides. So we're basically talking about coming outside of this large task force and breaking into smaller groups to do the work that we've been assigned to do. And so I consider that being a workflow. One of the terms outlined for us in the bylaws is a community resource panel. You may be familiar with this concept where there are there are persons that work for different agencies, whether they be private agencies, government agencies, that have committed to help us and talk to us in this work. And so you'll see that name come up again later on in the slide. But you see here some of the agencies that the elected officials have asked to be available to us as a task force for discussion. Two more vocabulary words. Forgive me for going to teacher mode here, but I'm just trying to make sure we don't have any confusion. Roundtable and listening session have been used almost interchangeably up until today. Roundtable is what I consider, and in talking, having one-on-one with many of you, you also consider to be committees. And so for our purposes, they act as committees to gather data from the panels, to gather data from residents interested in this topic. And each roundtable should focus on evaluating the existing services and practices around that area, identifying gaps, and suggesting budget figures whenever those are appropriate and are applicable, and recommending a different crisis response related to that area. The listening session could be conducted by the roundtables or the full task force as needed. These are expected to be spaces where persons most affected by the criminal legal system may voice their concerns or tell their stories. So for me, this is a larger group for the most part, particularly for persons whose voices are not traditionally heard by decision makers. These listening sessions may also be conducted with members of professional service agencies and organizations. So again, to me, a roundtable is a committee of this group that invites residents that care about that focus area to come with them and talk to some of our to some of our community resource panels or others that are interested. So the data gathering happens in both sessions, the roundtables and the listening sessions, and you'll see more of that in a second. These are the initial roundtable options. We are starting here. 5 of these 6 were already decided for us in the bylaws, and we may have renamed some of them. SROs, court system, violence interruption and de-escalation, alternatives to 911 or improvements, mental health crises, gun violence. We will go back through these one by one during our editing process, but these are the 6 that we are starting with. There may be others once we get into the work. Some of these may actually have recommendations quite soon. Some will have recommendations at the end of our work, but there's no reason we have to wait for 18 months or so to make any recommendations if that roundtable has gotten to a point where you feel really strong about what you want to recommend and you brought that to the task force and we're like, yeah, let's go with it. So this is the workflow that Marcia and I are suggesting. That 1, roundtable meets with public and private community resource panelists. Again, those that were listed in the previous slide, as well as others that you identify as a roundtable you want to hear from, not just from the government agencies, but also community organizations. One reason you want to meet with them is to find out who they think you should listen to for your listening session. So you come in with your own ideas of who you want to hear from, but you also want to hear what those who are doing the work, who they feel you should hear from as well. 2, roundtable conducts listening sessions with residents most affected. 3, the resource panel data and the listening session data are analyzed, and we hope that we will have some assistance with that. And then 4, the roundtable reports at the monthly meeting with the task force. So the roundtable work is happening in between the monthly sessions. We can revisit these steps as necessary. Once you start your roundtable, this is not strictly prescribed, but this is a recommendation to you. And we can talk about it at any time. The expected outcome of your roundtable work is that a recommendation that you can bring back to the task force, that the full task force can discuss along with you, vote on, and eventually bring as a recommendation to our elected bodies. And again, this work is conducted in between task force meetings. This is the result of some one-on-one conversations that Marcia and I have had with you about where you think you might want to serve with these 6. This is a work in progress. We are going to edit it, move it around, whatever it takes. As you see, it's not necessarily balanced. If your name is here more than once, that means you told one of us that, a second or third option is a possibility. Some of you said, hey, you can place me wherever you like, and I'm ready to work. And so this is just a start. And we'll come back to this and fill this out. Keep in mind that we would like to see these roundtables also manned by residents who are interested in this topic that also have great information to give and will be a part of your discussions. Let's see what I have here. Okay, so this is you were sent a sheet out, I believe, last week with guidelines. This is just the same information you've seen before. Those are the things that you are tasked with doing as a committee or roundtable: evaluating practices, identifying gaps, including budget, if applicable, and recommending a different crisis response. These are some important questions that you may want to start with as you listen to people, as you talk to your community resources. How does the area impact individual safety? How does the area of your roundtable impact public safety? What interactions take place when there is an intersection, as we talked about before, with these agencies? Who's currently required to respond to the harm? What is their capacity for service? What is their cost for service, and from what source? And can sequential intercept mapping be applied to identify points of need and appropriate responses? These, again, are just suggested questions. Once you get together, you will have a sense of how you want to work as you listen and ask questions. Marcia and I and your task force support staff, Dwayne, Ryan, are accessible through the email address that Marcia mentioned before. This is for your use as well as the public's. And as roundtable conveners, we want you to, let us know when you need help with scheduling, getting this space to actually have a virtual meeting or a physical meeting down the road one day. We hope soon, but not too soon. Translation and interpretation services, and any note taking, because there is an expectation that there would be note taking. So that is the end of the lecture. I'm gonna go back now into a live mode where we can do some editing. And so I'm going to ask a question first. Is there any, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody. Is there any need to talk about the definitions for the roundtable, listening session, community resource panels? Anybody have any comment? Ready to move on. I love it.
I can just tell you that I saw my name on 4 of 6, and I'm not going to do 4. I'm not trying to be an overachiever.
So. Oh, no. That's that. Yeah, we're not on that slide yet.
Okay.
I was just talking about the definitions. We're gonna, as I said, we're gonna work that page until it's perfect.
I feel like I could use some help distinguishing the difference between the two.
Table and listening sessions.
Yes, please.
Sure, absolutely. So let me go back to the document quickly. And as I see it, the roundtable is not an event as much as it is a committee.
Okay.
And as a committee, before you have your listening session, in order to be as informed as possible during that listening session, you want to hear from the community resources and the private resource panelists.
Okay.
And so you're going to the sheriff, for instance. You someone in the schools and and hearing from them about your work, about the work we're about to do, you and your committee. And then once you feel that you've gotten a good sense of what they're looking for, and you've given them a good sense of what you would like to see happen, you and your roundtable, your committee, goes out into a larger public venue, virtually right now, and invite people to come and talk and testify about their experiences, their concerns. So the listening session is somewhat like a town hall that your roundtable has the freedom to conduct as you see fit.
Okay, so the former, I mean, it still feels like, how do we bring in the most voices to the former in order to build on the latter? You know what I'm saying, right? So we've got some ideas about folks that hold more formal positions that we want to bring to make decisions about and I'm sorry, I'm not even using the names. That's how confused I am right now. But at what point do we bring in voices that are more marginalized to incorporate into the broader town hall-like procedure? Or is that from the very beginning? Sorry if I'm further complicating things.
That will be in the listening sessions.
Okay.
In the listening sessions are not necessarily places where you won't have the government officials. If you want them at the listening sessions,
okay.
Well,
okay. I was going to say, Xavier, I think it's pretty important for somebody from the sheriff's office and the school board, not just as resource panelists, but to be in the listening session to hear from students and parents. Somebody from the DA's office to be in the listening session to hear from victims of crime, not just to talk to us behind closed doors. And for community people to be able to talk to them when they wouldn't necessarily have a venue to, and for those discussions of practical solutions and the details of that to be somewhat incorporated in that listening session as well. Not just the narratives of the problem, but the discussion of the practical solutions. I think that we want that out in the open too.
I know we're getting down the road a little bit, but I think that we want to create a context in which people can speak freely. And if you put a sheriff in there, everybody ain't gonna speak freely. So
thank you.
I agree to some extent, maybe a superintendent, maybe, but someone in there with a gun and a uniform isn't gonna get the same information that we might get. Because I've done focus groups, listening to, I've done it for a while. So I think you want to create a situation where people don't feel like someone's staring at them, picking them apart.
Could I jump in? Because I knew somebody was gonna say it. I would hope that throughout this process, and I've said this to somebody else, there are times as an elected official, we deal with people that strip us down and tear us down, but we still have to meet with them. We still have to be somewhat courageous about it, right? I can't even count. The meeting I had right before this, the people rip me apart every time. I've never, but I met with them because that's my charge. Even if I wasn't a public servant, I chose this advocacy life, right? Even before I was an elected official. So I know that it's hard. And I know that it might seem to some people like I'm encouraging you all to go and sit down. But what I would argue, there are just certain things that I might not be able to tell you because as learned as I am, as much as I read, you might have questions about a department and I cannot splice it, right? So there might be a time where you have to get the best information from somebody who might be from that office. That being said, I would just hope that we could figure out what person that could be, because there are lawyers that are at the sheriff's office, there are social workers at the sheriff's office that could probably answer questions better than I could. And you all might have some very real questions. I gave an example of somebody said the other day, I'm trying to be quick. Somebody might have made a statement and said, well, they don't have this there. A lot of times elected officials, we have to go back and get stuff. I don't think you all should have to wait when we could put somebody in the room. The same could be said for somebody who's on the school board. You all might say, well, you know, this school doesn't have this, but if we have that teacher in the room, they can attest to the fact, oh, no, well, you know, Riverside does have this, but Southern doesn't have this. Xavier, Mr. Cason, you probably knew what was at every school, and Bettina's a chair and she does, but these are just things I want you all to think about as you try to do this work. So that's not me saying you have to have somebody in there with a badge and a gun. I would never force that upon anybody in this room, because I know that there's some very real sensitivities and some very real concerns. But just know it might not be the worst thing to have somebody in that room who can answer the questions that you need in an intelligent way. That's all I'm gonna say.
I do one
That I
one
can't,
slight-
that I might not be able to, but go ahead.
I want to do one slight pushback. Is that I'm sorry. This is that if we're gonna do a listening session, we shouldn't be there to respond in the first place. In my opinion, we should literally be there to listen,
Right.
gather the information, and then
Right.
take it back, as opposed to because people can get defensive, so then it can turn into a back and forth.
Right.
But that I think what you're discussing, like that is needed at many times. There's a
Right.
problem. People need someone there who has answers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we're gonna make it a listening session, we should just make it as open as possible and just have it be an open dialogue and discussion that we can then chop up later. You get the transcript, you know, you go through the transcript, you start to identify themes that are recurring, like doors and barriers that are continuously mentioned by multiple people, and then you can move that. You know, that's what I think about when I think listening session.
Yeah, Tyler, that makes actually more sense, because then, as you said, that's the kind of thing we can communicate to those people running community organizations, and especially the agencies that need to hear those things. But as you rightly say, they haven't had the opportunity to express that or feel intimidated to do it. But this is that open opportunity. As long as we can be clear, and maybe in the resource, when we meet with the resource folk, to Jesse's point he made, at the outset, is so much information and data and stories that have been gathered. We don't want to feel like the people who participated in that process, that was for naught. When the students made their heartfelt views felt on the SROs, to start over and, okay, tell us, let's start gathering information about, to start out and be clear, this is what we've already know are stories and real problems. And we can build on that, but we want to respect all the effort that was built into gathering all those stories and all that information before we ever got started.
And Jesse had his hand up as well, but I just do want to mention that I did not mention the meeting with the community resource panels as a closed door meeting. That was not the intent, if that's how it was taken or heard. Your roundtable invites whoever you want to meet with those persons. Jesse?
Yeah, thank you. I want to honor, I think there's not one way to be a roundtable, and there's not one way to coordinate a listening session. And I think we need to work together to consider for each of the roundtables, and this is really going back to what Alec's question was, to understand the difference between the roundtables and the listening sessions, because I know I was confused at one point too. And it took me about 3 or 4 times with Xavier to be like, oh, this is what you mean when you say roundtable. And so in my mind, a roundtable is just a committee. It's a committee of task force members, period, right? And so if I know I want to serve on the SRO roundtable. And so I'm thinking about who are the most impacted folks as it relates to the issues of SROs. So I might have a listening session, or we might have a listening session with just young people. And to Tyler's point, the sheriff won't be there. Quite frankly, the superintendent wouldn't be there, because we want to create a protected space where young people feel a sense of psychological safety and trust that they can say what they need to say, that they'll be believed, they'll be heard, and we can hear what they actually need to say, right? We might have a completely separate listening session with SROs and with the sheriff, right? Because they are also one of the most impacted people, because they are the ones in the role. So we have to be able to have the range to create protected spaces to be able to hear from all of the impacted groups within the focus of the different roundtables, right? And that's just SROs in my mind, right? So I want to honor the various kinds of ranges that will be needed for each roundtable. And as we all consider where we offer our gifts and our energies, and to Alec's point, who else we might activate in the research that we collect and in the processes we kind of work through. We have the community resource panel, which is a list of different people who are already leading, and we can be creative and strategic to say, like, oh, if there's someone who we know is in a great position to offer additional expertise that isn't already listed in the bylaws, there's nothing saying that we can't activate them to be a part of any of those conversations, be it a private meeting with the superintendent, an official listening session, or whatever. So I think we have the autonomy. We can give ourselves permission to do what we feel we need to do. We just have to be communicating and thinking critically and creatively so that we set ourselves up for success, and we can actually collect the data that we want to. So that's very much where I'm coming from. And I don't want us to tie our hands behind our back before we've even begun, thinking that we can't do a thing or we have to patrol how someone else does their listening session. I want to trust that we were all appointed, we are all intelligent, we all have skills and resources and networks that we can activate. And if we need help, trust and believe, I hope that you will ask, because I will be asking you for help when I feel I need it, right? And so let's have that trust, let's have open lines of communication, and let's get this work done. That's me.
And so I appreciate that. The agency in the roundtables is exactly what Jesse just said. And that is that's my intent, Marcia's intent, that you'll know who you need to hear from. You'll have a good sense of how you want to conduct the roundtables, because these are different focus areas, different types of harm, different types of possible intimidation. And once you're working in your passion, you know the scene, the spaces that you want to create to do your work. Yes, Marcia.
Thanks. Jesse, you said that the roundtables will be with task force members and others. Okay, yeah. We'll get the task force members will get together and populate it, and then go for there. And I just want to reiterate that support team, that list of public agencies, are in those bylaws, because that means that they are essentially required to help us. So they're there for us to get what we need. And so we don't even need to do, we can just, Dwayne will help us with this. We have a need. We will identify that need and where we need to get that information from. And the bylaws, in my mind, just make it formally required that we get that information, that they're part of this mission.
And it very well may be that when you have done your listening sessions, you report back to the full group, a question or discussion in that full group may say, hey, we need to go back out and hear some more. You have that agency. And the only reason I did the flow chart is because there are some people like me, like, show me a roadmap, but it's not prescriptive. There are three people who have at some point or another had their hand raised during this discussion. And I want to make sure if they still have a question or comment. One of them was Wanda, Dr. Boone. And sorry, it took me so long. I'm looking at my participant.
No,
your hand.
It's okay. So I often find myself in uncomfortable places where people who are parts of institutions in places of power come into a room with people that don't have the same level of power. And so as a facilitator, what I've tried to do is first level the playing field, in that when you're in this space, you're not bigger than the other individuals who are in the room. And sometimes that takes a lot of work. So if there are, if there's law enforcement, sometimes that have been like this, then I'll point out, you seem uncomfortable. Can you undo your arms? So that the young people in the room don't see that body language and feel a certain way, and then empower others to have voices heard and interrupting. So, so the spaces that I have been in have involved individuals who are part of the challenge and those who have never been in a situation where they've been allowed in some of these spaces and rooms. And it can be really powerful when those with power become humble, which has happened many times, and even have cried when realizing that their power was shielding them from having a real conversation with people who can possibly be a solution. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And I appreciate Tyler's message in the chat mentioning using that hand raise function with the committee this large. If it's comfortable to do so, I know it's difficult on a phone, especially that we do if we all agree to use the raise hand function either. And I'll be more diligent to watch that. Sam, did you still have something that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I don't know. This is more of like a down the line question. I don't know how we'll be able to do it because of we might be having some listening sessions in person depending on what the guidelines look like and how people are vaccinated in the future. But I wanted to know if there would be like any utility to using some anonymity in the meeting. So making sure that the participants are coming in anonymous and giving their input and asking their questions anonymously, because that might free up the conversation so that people will freely share and give their true perspective on things, as opposed to kind of shaping it in a way to, I'm trying to figure out the way to word this, but confidentiality can help, making sure that people speak, freely about what they feel on certain topics.
I appreciate that. I hadn't thought about that in ways to make that happen, but I know that there are. They've been used in other town hall situations, other focus group situations. So we wanted to make sure we acknowledge that. Jesse.
And just kind of jumping off of what Samuel said, Nora, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I feel like you will know this better than I, but I know that with some of the different research efforts that the Office on Youth has had, like I'm remembering that they had a couple of like different anonymous ways that people could like call in and provide feedback. So like there was a way for their feedback to be collected and submitted without them having to like name themselves. Do you remember something like that, or am I making that up?
Yeah, so with our process, we did ask folks to identify, like we were sort of trying to collect, we were using that information to make sure that we like reached our target. So we were trying to like collect demographic information, but it wasn't, so yeah, we asked for folks' names and sort of to self-identify. Yeah, and I would like to just offer a bit, like, I think if it was really about the space that we created that made folks feel comfortable to share and just who was in that space, like, people got personal and shared things that were like, definitely like heavy. So yeah, I don't think it, I think, it's a nice step to take, but I don't, I think if we didn't take that step, it'd also be fine. It's just really about the space.
Well, yeah, I'm just mindful that there may be groups of folks that we want to hear from that, like, they may not, like, we may really value and need their feedback, but they may not be in a place to be named. And I think Samuel's insight there is key. Like, even thinking about, like, and this goes back to what Councilmember Xavier was talking about in terms of like thinking about folks that don't speak English. Like, is there a way to be able to collect that data so someone can just say what they need to say, you know, in Spanish and whatever, and we can do the back end work of getting that translated. Or like if someone's undocumented, they're not going to show up at, you know, like there's different dynamics where like folks are already vulnerable and we don't want to make them more vulnerable while also soliciting their feedback. So I think there are a lot of different ways that we can take it. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Samuel, in terms of like, will there be ways in which we make feedback loops anonymous so that we can still listen to people without having to know exactly who those people are, so that they're still protected? Like, it may not be a physical space that we are protecting, but it's a bit abstract, but it's still the same concept of like setting people up for success in that way.
Any others on the way we operate our roundtables? You know, the concerns or comments on that? Okay, so what I'd like to do next is actually look at the definitions and descriptions of the roundtables. The descriptions on the presentation come from the bylaws with some wordsmithing from Marcia and I. Even beyond what we look at today, if you feel that you need to redefine the function of the roundtable that you end up on, that's fine. Again, this is something just to give us a sense, a starting place, and it's not a prescription. But I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page on what these roundtables are assigned to do. So going back to the presentation, let's start with SROs. The language we have here is the existing school resource officers program, which places a law enforcement official into every Durham County middle school and high school. This roundtable may also consider how expulsions, suspensions, and disciplinary policies affect educational achievement. Okay, any concerns or? All right, I'm gonna try to open up my window so I can see people a little better. So I'll move on to the next one. Court system. In the bylaws, it specifically mentions drug court. We want to kind of look at the entire system as necessary. I'm sorry, Mike, you have a hand raised on SROs? You're still muted, sir.
The court system one is a vital one, but it is so huge, I might argue that to basically split it into one that focuses on the front end of when someone enters the criminal justice system for diversion, drug court, et cetera, and one that focuses on the back end, particularly the reentry process, the probation post-punishment. Those are two very, very large and distinct topics. I think they might be worthy of their own separate. But then again, you could make that argument with some other ones. And then we'll get to it's not so much a matter of whether we should have a roundtable on the crisis response on the 911 system, clearly, but the timing of that seems important since the new Department of Community Wellness and Safety is already up and running, already considering hiring people to begin to do that very thing. So we certainly need to be expeditious about them so we don't come up with recommendations that the cities in this new department are already well underway.
Well noted. And we did include language on incarceration, probation, and post-punishment in that definition, in that description.
Exactly. I might make an argument that those are worth it. That's worth its own separate committee, subcommittee, and listening sessions.
And it very well may be that that's what you work on exclusively, knowing that those are ways that you interact with the drug court. So that we're trying to give you as much flexibility, language that gives you the flexibility to craft it as you see fit. We really do. And so again, these are just starting places. I saw another hand, I thought. Okay, maybe not. Violence interruption and de-escalation. We know that Bold City United is doing some work in that area, but they're not the only ones. And you may want to hear from others as well. training formerly incarcerated residents to intervene in situations of violence to prevent escalation, including a specific domestic violence cohort to focus on domestic violence cases. So this is the broad view. And I'm bringing these up so that when we go to the page where we decide, okay, where am I really going to serve? Just have a reminder of what we're looking for. Just moving on to gun violence. This is one that was not in the bylaws, addressing the many ways that gun violence endangers the safety and wellness of Durham residents. I think we are well aware of the impact, and we feel, Marcia and I felt that we should also talk about that in the same way we talk about the other sources of harm in places where harm happens. Mental health crises. I think this is directly from the bylaws. A new community nonviolence mental health first aid and de-escalation training program focusing on residents who are most likely to be victims or perpetrators of violence. And then under the 911 alternatives or improvements, as Mike mentioned, there are already, I'm sorry, Dr. Boone, I'll come back to you in a second. There's already work now that we have had presentation in the city about the new recommended department that's done a whole lot of work. And we'll talk about that again as well before we finish. And so, but we know that that's quite often the front door to a lot of the issues of safety and wellness. Back to mental health crises, Dr. Boone?
Yes. So I'm interested in prevention, not that no one else is, but this seems to be more intervention and how do we insert what we're doing into where we are now. I would like to focus on, in terms of mental health and actually everything that I see here in terms of prevention. When I see data that says that 85% of girls that are involved in the juvenile justice system have trauma and stressor related disorders, then to me, looking at mental health from, even when a baby is in a mom's arm, not that she would be violent with the child, but we need some action in terms of how we as a community can be more resilient, thinking about our trauma, and racism is a trauma too, but how do we address mental health that that really may influence a lot of the other things that we're seeing on this sheet. So, prevention is my thing. And so I'm more concerned about that as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I've added that we should also address options for prevention as well. Thank you for that. Jennifer.
Yeah, I had a similar question and just wanted to expand Dr. Boone's inquiry a little bit more. So I also had was confused about why we were talking about perpetrators of violence in a roundtable ostensibly for people living with mental health concerns, because statistically we know that is not who perpetrate. They are tens of times more likely to be victims of violence than anything else. But also the title mental health crisis, as was aptly mentioned, is like intervention focused, but the language about kind of mental health first aid, it seems prevention focused. So to the degree that this is, I guess I'm trying to understand how, if this is not organized around prevention already, how is this different than the 911 alternatives? I'm not understanding how those are being conceived differently, because a mental health crisis is an urgent emergent situation that requires crisis response, at least as I'm understanding the term. Am I misunderstanding the usage of the term in this context, or if my wires are getting crossed somewhere?
I totally understand what you're saying. If it's a matter of the title, we can just say mental health. I just want, is there concern about the focus of the roundtable? Because we know that the 911 calls is going to talk about that entry point.
I think for me, I'm trying to diagnose whether I'm having a content issue or a semantic issue. And what you just said makes me think I'm having a semantic issue And so for that reason, I will close my inquiry, and we will see where this moves forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to just dig in and double back on the flexibility within the roundtable to really determine where you want to work. This is the language that was given to us from the elected officials. And, you know, how we handle this is up to us. So I appreciate you lifting that up.
Thank you.
Manju.
I think there might have been someone ahead of me in line.
All right. Jesse?
Mine is really quickly and is actually off of what was just said from Jennifer. In the bylaws, the roundtable that is more to do with mental health is about a new community nonviolence mental health first aid and de-escalation training program that focuses on residents who are most likely to be victims or perpetrators of violence. That, while related, feels distinct from a separate roundtable, which is a new on-call crisis response, which would allow certain calls for police assistance to be handled by other trained professions. So like the mental health crises one listed here, I think is more about activating and working with residents and community members who aren't employed, who aren't trained professionals, but are often, as you kind of said, the victims, and we want to figure out how to prevent that, but also hurt people. And if you're in crisis, right, like you can also be a victim and a perpetrator at the same time. And like being able to hold that compassion so that we're not, punishing people for the harm that they've caused when they actually need to receive care, it's tough. And that feels, again, related but different, related to but different from or different than a new on-call crisis response process, so that when people call 911, the crisis responders that are activated are the ones who are in the professional position to actually provide the professional care that's needed. So I think it is semantics, and just wanted to clarify that based on what is written in the bylaws to back up what Xavier and Marcia have been doing. And thank you for your leadership again, y'all. We're getting there. We're getting there.
And thank you, Jesse. I do want to lift up a comment from Bettina, chair of the Board of Education, reminding us that these bylaws were created before a lot of this work that's happening currently has been done. I mean, that it was a while back when the bylaws were actually crafted and moved from one elected group to the other. It took a while. So some of this language is actually almost outdated. There's a lot of work that has been done since these bylaws were crafted. I'm more concerned about the work of the roundtable, getting together, seeing what's actually happening, and getting a sense of what else needs to be added to the work that's already being done. So please don't feel prescribed by these definitions and descriptions. Mike.
Go ahead, Manju. I was going to back up what Dr. Boone was saying, but you go ahead first.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate the work that's gone into these bylaws that have gotten us these categories and this thinking that's gone into developing the roundtable model. And I wanted to lift up some words we talked about in the first convening of this body just 2 sessions ago. We lifted this quote from Mayor Pro Tem Jillian Johnson when she said, "The safest communities don't have the most cops, they have the most resources." And it's a theme that we discover again and again as we try to address some particular thread of our patterns of violence and patterns of harm and patterns of exploitation, is that there are these bigger structural inequity issues that it's like impossible for us to like just solve it by moving the small pieces when we're ignoring the gigantic boulders of how resource allocation works around housing, education, healthcare, food, water, like which communities a polluting company comes into, that kind of thing. And it was something that struck us when we first saw the draft of the bylaws. Like, it was like, we hope we're going to get to talk about the heart of the matter. And, these things are also crucial intervention points, but they are downstream intervention points, right? I'm not trying to throw a wrench in the works. I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that we can be developing alternatives to these things? But I'm really feeling what Dr. Wanda Boone was saying about where the trauma begins, and that when we systematically underfund the things that we know help people thrive through a public health lens, that's when we start seeing really massive shifts in outcomes. And it's not, and I say this as someone who makes my living doing trainings for people, it's not when we do a really dope workshop with some folks, though the dope workshops help us show up better for sure. But when we can fundamentally stabilize the lives of Durham residents in those macroscopic ways, folks are going to be a lot better equipped to get more out of the workshop. So I guess that's kind of the big picture thought I'm thinking about. And I'm not saying this having some proposal or some pushback to offer, but just that.
Thank you so much. Marcia, do you have any reflections on where we are at this point? Because we're very, very concerned about starting roundtables without a good sense of how they would function. And you haven't said much in a while. I just want to get your reflections real quick.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I just want to ask everybody, what have we forgotten? Is there anything missing? And I also would like to speak to what you just said, Manju. There is the Gestalt. We've got these different roundtables looking at these different, but they're like bricks.
Sorry, what does Gestalt mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to get there. They're like bricks. Like each roundtable is a brick. Well, then you put them together and it's a wall. You can take those bricks and build something and it's something else, right? And that's what I mean by the system. So as we think about these individual issues, like looking at those 911, what I thought was so profound about the sequential intercept mapping is that, and that Gudrun pointed out to me so brilliantly, was you can see how you can change one thing and it does in fact change a system. And so I think we do need to look at things with those eyes. And I think also in our recommendations, we can do big recommendations. I mean, I would hope that we would. I would assume that we would. So I appreciate that. I appreciate what you said. And the question again to everybody is, have we left anything? I mean, is there something missing? Okay, we can always add it later. And we can separate. I like the idea of that court, by the way, the court roundtable could be two. You could, incarceration could be its own field of study. So thanks, Xavier.
Yeah. I just want to make sure this is a productive conversation as we talk about the process for how we do our work, but also a reminder that we're not as constrained as it may feel. That the elected bodies during the time that the bylaws were created were working as three separate elected bodies doing something together, which is so wonderful and unusual. And this was what we did at the time, and it's now in our hands, and we have great agency to to move in the direction we know we want to end up in. I thought that was another hand up. Mike, did you have more?
Yeah, I think Manju really helped me think of the way we can acknowledge that it's not something's missing. It's the real base of it all. If we don't address the real sources of trauma and harm that undergird it all, then those, the bricks are on a shaky foundation, whatever you want to call it. So but to Marcia's good point about, focus, when we very first met, even informally, it's anything where people are touching the criminal justice system is a way to kind of think at least the initial purview of this task force. So if we approach it with, this is our charge for maybe a phase 1, part 1 of these interventions, but then along the way, we're going to create a new idea, but just reinforce what we already know, that there are real deep issues of investment that are really necessary for the real prevention that you've been talking about, so that we may, in our year or whatever, these are the specific recommendations for these particular areas of intervention, but the city and the county, the community need to move on these deeper sources of investment in mental health care, not just mental health crisis intervention, in real health and real housing, et cetera. We're not charged with, since we're not the city and county commission, we can't do those things, but we can say these are the deeper issues that have become even more apparent are there, and that part 2 of the task force or someone else has got to deal with. And we're just giving you more evidence of why, and that the good interventions and the changes we're going to make are still going to be interventions in a system that is creating harm until we really can address that. But that's for that part 2. But I think we want to be emphasizing all those key things we're discovering in the process, and not thinking, okay, we're done.
Absolutely. So do we feel that we're in a place where we are ready to decide where you want to serve with these roundtables? I'm not sure that we
ask
are.
a question or add an idea? I guess I'm wondering, so if we were to divide ourselves among these 6 roundtables, we would have very small roundtables, which might be a good thing and might be what you're going for. Or it seems like some of these are programs that are already in motion, or initiatives that are like seeking direct input from this body as soon as possible, and other ones are at different places with less pressing nature. And we have 24 months together, 6 more months if we come to a 2/3 majority asking for more time. So I guess I'm saying we could possibly identify that we want to have these 6 roundtables and then choose 3 to focus on as a whole body this year, and then commit that next year will be, so by the end of this year, we're coming up with 3 awesome recommendations to bring to the 3 elected bodies. The next year, we'll work on the next set. Another option, if we want to fill out the task force more, and I'm saying this in recognition as I look around the folks at this table, it's some of the most busy, engaged, hardworking fam I know. And I know that you're at this table because you're doing amazing stuff in other parts of Durham simultaneously, and you're attending to your families, and you're surviving a pandemic. So, so if it feels like a more reasonable load rather than having Jesse be on 4 committees, yeah, just an option.
Yeah. Again, Jesse was never intended to be on 4 committees.
That's right.
Okay. But the point is, and I'm feeling the same thing, Manju. I'm feeling like Marcia and I need to do a little more work on the committee structures and personnel, because we just basically had one-on-one talks, and people were just kind of being aspirational about where they would like to serve. But even the structure of the committees can be revisited. We have one more meeting the June meeting, of course, is coming up in 2 weeks. So we can firm all of that up during that meeting. I'm very fine with that. I mean, that's feels like where this was going. Anyway, as far as how this was looking, we did want to make sure. Are you okay with that? Is everybody okay with that? As far as making the assignments in our next meeting and doing some more work on which ones we should prioritize and possibly do do less than 6 to start off with. Okay, get some thumbs up on that. We did want to hear from Dwayne on some of the ways that he would and his office would support the work of the roundtables. So I'll give the floor over to you for a few minutes.
So just to make sure that I didn't miss out anything, I have what I've written here, and so here we go. So the city is committed to supporting the important work of this task force. One way the city is demonstrating this commitment is by providing staffing to support the work of this task force. My role is to serve as a lead staff support for the city. That means that my full-time responsibility is to be resource to the chairs, as well as to this body to help the work move forward. In that role, some of the ways I'm available to support the task force will include supporting the co-chairs in organizing, coordinating, and operationalizing the work of this group, conducting research in response to questions of the task force, which include research of policy areas, local programs, or national program of interest to this group, and preparing memos summarizing this work. Conducting interviews and focus groups of interest to the task force and synthesizing insights emerging from this qualitative work. Collecting and analyzing data requested by the task force, organizing meetings and roundtables at the request of the task force and ensuring roundtables are adequately supported. Identifying and coordinating other resources and partners who can support this work. Supporting a task force as you develop proposals and helping to guide these recommendations through internal processes necessary for them to come before elected bodies. Acting as an impartial and authentic listener who follows the lead of the task force and acting as a custodian or guardian for this important group. Where time permits, supporting a planning process for 911 calls for service pilots that will be discussed in a future meeting, and that one will include Ryan Smith. The city is dedicating additional staff to support this work, and thanks to Amber, Ryan, and others who are behind the scenes, helping each week to support your important work. And I will work closer with them, but my position is meant to be a full-time resource for this group. And to be clear, I'm not here to advance an agenda set by the city. I'm not here to advance any agenda whatsoever. You are driving this process. I am resource available to the task force to help you succeed in this charge. And with that said, I also want to make it clear that I look forward to meeting each of you. And if you have any availability to chat remotely with me, I'd be more than happy to set up time to speak with you individually, but I'd love to speak with each of you. My email address to the city is my first name dot my last name at durhamnc.gov. So Dwayne.Campbell at durhamnc.gov. So if you're happy to meet with me, just for us to talk about your experiences, we introduce each other, learn about each other. And I think that's one of the best ways that we can build partnership and synergy across the group. And I think that's the way I want to work with you. And again, just look at it this way, that I'm here to support you. I'm no content expert when it comes on to this. I'm here to organize as best as possible the thoughts that are brought before this task force and submit it to the city of Durham. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Will there be an opportunity to get the listing of your work in writing that we can get out to the members of the task force?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We, he's mentioned to us that we're driving the agenda, and Marcia and I are trying our best to make sure it looks more like a 6-lane or 3-lane highway and not bumper cars. So we'll go back to the drawing board on this committee work, and we're gonna get it right. But the discussion has been very helpful to me, I can say for myself, as far as what it's gonna really take to make this work happen in ways that make sense, and not wasting time. So I appreciate all of the input. I do want to mention that next week we will meet. In 2 weeks we will meet, and we're going to definitely hear from those who did the work on the 911 calls, as far as where they are at this point and where they will be moving forward. And Marcia, one other area that we're going to focus on. What was that for the next meeting?
Well, we were gonna listen to hear about the 911 because that would touch all, that information is going to touch all areas of interest. So that was going to be and also just how those roundtables, how we're moving forward on the roundtables and really beginning to, hopefully, I was hoping that we would also be able by in 2 weeks to have some sense of other people that are not on the task force serving on those roundtables, so that at least some of the folks task force members had gotten together to think about who else needs to be on that roundtable with them. Who would they like to need to fulfill that?
Absolutely. We're also going to talk about the research.
Right, that's exactly right. And to introduce, so we have the list of the panels of the government officials, essentially, right? The government's different agencies. But there's also academic researchers from Central, Duke, and UNC that would also like to help us. So that would be, that's important for us to know as task force members and roundtable activists.
Absolutely. So those 2 items are definitely going to be part of the agenda. We also will talk about the open meeting laws, how many people can be on a roundtable, and what has to happen around your work in a roundtable session as a committee. So we'll make sure we get clarification on that as well. And then once we get past our next meeting in June, I don't have the date in front of me, and I'm not gonna make that mistake again, but that in that meeting, we will make clear how you operate within the open meeting laws as well. And hopefully we can walk away from that next meeting very clear about how we actually work out and operationalize the roundtables and the next steps. Marcia, you got a closing.
Okay, and the next is June 9th.
Thank you.
I'm reading my phone, right? Yes, well, it's, again, great to be together. Such an honor to serve with y'all. And let's just go around, just take a second with a word or a few words. Just what are you taking away from this meeting tonight? And I'll begin. And it has to be inspiration.
Me.
And pass it.
Work to do.
Great. Pass it to Alec.
I'm ready to listen. I'll pass it to Jennifer.
I'm going to echo Cynthia. I was just thinking to myself that I need to be diligent about setting aside some mental bandwidth for this day. I already knew that, but goodness, after today, I know that. And I will pass to Samuel.
Thank you. From this meeting, I want to take that I need to take a step back and gain a more familiar understanding of the systems that go into these issues we're about to try to address. So I'll pass it on to Jesse.
I'm just leaving with motivation. I got the song Motivation in my head. In my head, so motivation. And I will pass it to Tyler.
Peace, y'all. I'm leaving just ready to listen to folks. I like listen was a good word. I think it sounds like that's the collective next phase after we get all this internal stuff done. So I pass it to Toya.
I'm leaving with fellowship. And I'm passing to Isaac.
I'm leaving with an excitement to learn from what all these roundtable conversations have to offer us. And I will pass it to Nori.
I am leaving with also excitement, just to be able to like talk to folks and really get to get their perspectives and opinions about the topics. Yeah, that has me really excited. And I'm gonna pass it to Xavier. Can I pass it to you?
Of course you can. Of course you can. I'm leaving with gratitude. Gratitude for all that's been said today, all that you wanted to say and didn't, so you wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings, all that you are going to say in the future that's going to bring us forward. I'll pass it to Bettina.
Hey y'all, I'm leaving also with gratitude. I think I'm just very thankful for how thoughtful you are in approaching this work, and sitting in for board member Lewis today, but I just really appreciated hearing how you all are approaching what we're doing. Oh, and I'll pass it to Dwayne.
I leave with awareness, that we bring an awareness of self and others' experiences in everything that we do for the committee and for the city of Durham. And I pass it to Mike.
Based on yesterday's anniversary, I would have said impatient, but based on this meeting, I'm going to say hope. Commissioner Burns.
She may have had to step away.
Samuel.
I've already gone, but just wanted to note that I read a report yesterday that said that America has not gone a week without police taking the life of somebody since the death of George Floyd. Just wanted to make that noted.
Thank you for lifting up his name. I meant to lift up his name earlier because it's been a year and Jatoia, yes, girl. Girl, like that's been so yes. So yes, and yes. Jatoia, have you gone? You already
had.
Yeah. Whoo, girl.
How about Ajane?
There you go.
Thank you. Excitement to get this work crack-a-lacking, get it cracking. And Amber.
Hey y'all, I'm leaving with continued dedication to this work. Thank you all for your dedication as well.
And Manju.
I'm leaving with openness and curiosity. Has anyone not gone yet? Did you go, Miss Cynthia?
I didn't go.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There she is.
No, I'm sorry, y'all. I was walking down some stairs, but I can say that I am leaving here with a more firm understanding of how we need to move forward and set these tables up to be more equitable, open, and safe.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And with that, thank y'all, and see you soon. And we can blessings. Good night.